500 years ago, he washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck, and upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, "I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die."
The Phantom!
The ghost who walks.
The Phantom!
Enemies beware, the Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He finds you.
G'day everybody, and how are you going? We are up to episode 70. Boy, we are sure flying through these podcast numbers. We'll be celebrating 100 soon, I reckon. As
Fingers
normal,
crossed.
we have Dan. How are you, mate?
G'day, Jermaine. Yes, good to be here. Good to talk all things fandom again. Very excited for this episode.
Yes, it's going to be a big one. Normally we do have Steve, but I think he might be enjoying his school holidays a bit, and time might have gotten away from
Who
himself.
knows?
So
He may join
shout out
us
to
at some
Steve.
point. We'll
Yeah.
see.
He may join us. But a shout out to Steve. So let's not diddle daddle and let's get straight into it. So today we have a special guest. He is one of only 10 people who in 81 years has drawn Sunday Phantom strips. And he's the current one. So he comes along with the names of Ray Moore, a Wilson McCoy, a Bill Lingnate, a Cy Barry, who we've heard before on this podcast, George Olsen, a Fred Fredericks, Graham Nolan, a Paul Ryan, Terry Beattie, and adding to that who's who of comic strips, we have Jeff Weigel. How are you, Jeff?
I'm very good, thanks.
So thank you for joining us, Jeff.
Thanks for having me.
We had a little bit of a mix-up with the time zones. So it's 4:30 a.m. or 4:15 a.m. in your time. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Very sorry to pull you out of bed at this hour.
No, it's really okay. It's kind of funny. I was expecting, from the discussions that we'd had through Facebook, I was expecting it to be at 9 a.m. And so I was all prepared for that. And I was sort of laying in bed because it's pretty ordinary for me to sort of wake up around 4 just for a few minutes for some reason. My brain just sort of goes off around 4 o'clock. So I was laying in bed and I heard my phone ping and said, "Oh, we're just about ready for you." And I went, "Oh, you are you?" So I came downstairs and booted up the computer and got ready for you. So you didn't wake me at least.
I'm glad that, and sorry about that, but I really appreciate you talking to us, and looking forward to this. So, if possible, could you just give us an introduction about yourself, like how you got into comics, a little bit about your history as a comic creator, but also some of your heroes, and I guess anything like that, and then we'll just go from there.
Sure. I've been interested in comics since I was a little kid. I grew up in the 60s and 70s. And, I grew up in sort of the tail end of the silver age of comics here in America. And in the early bronze age in the 70s. And I just sort of fell in love with the medium as soon as I started to be able to read, which was about second grade. And I think probably my first interest in comics was sparked by the Batman TV show craze in like 1966.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's when it first came on my radar, and I've sort of traced the first issues that I owned to just a couple of months after that show premiered. So I think that's probably what happened. And I've been following it ever since. And I just fell in love with the work of guys like Nick Cardy. And I don't know if you guys know these names or not, being on the other side of the world, but Nick Cardy and Kurt Swan and Neil Adams, a lot of the DC artists, and then later on a lot of the Marvel artists too. So I've been inspired by most of the people that any American comic strip artist knows.
So
And,
my daughter's decided to join the podcast. Keep going.
Oh, is that your daughter, Jermaine?
Yeah, that's my daughter.
Okay. That's 2 podcasts in a row she's joined us now.
Yeah, 2 podcasts in a row. She's wants to get on board.
So, Jeff, would you say that those guys were your heroes in terms of artists that you aspire to draw like and this sort of thing? Or?
Yeah, they were certainly the guys that sparked my interest, and I just sort of became fascinated by their work, and a lot of other guys too who I haven't named. I'll just mention like Gene Colan also as another guy who really gained my attention, and a lot of other people. And as time went on and I got more interested in the deeper history of comics, the guys that inspired me and frankly still inspire me today, and whose work I go to just for how-to knowledge, is still the same guys that inspire worldwide cartoonists like Hal Foster and Alex Raymond. Yep.
Yeah.
I still think Hal Foster is the greatest guy to ever put pen to paper for comics.
Yeah, I still read his Prince Valiant stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been recollecting those new hardcovers that are coming out from, I think, Fantagraphics. So as they come out, I still collect those things. It's sort of my second purchase of all the Prince Valiant stuff, but it's hard to resist. Those things are so beautifully produced.
So do you sound like you're a collector as much as you are as an artist as well, are you? Or?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a collector. In fact, just within the last couple of years, I sold the vast majority of my comic book collection just because they were sitting on a shelf gathering dust, and I just decided to get rid of them.
Sure.
To sort of purge myself of all the stuff that I have around here. But it's okay because there are so many collections that are printed better than the original comics that I still have all that stuff in some sort of book form these days. Anyway, to sort of talk about how I got into comics eventually, I always tried to get into comics at like the most inopportune time, it seemed like. Like the early 90s when the comic book industry was crashing was one time when I was trying to get work and there wasn't a lot of work to be found. And just other spots where it was really hard to get entrance into mainstream comics. I worked for many years as a graphic designer in like corporate design, doing things like annual reports and things like that for design firms here in St. Louis, Missouri, and other places. In fact, right out of college, I actually moved to New York so I could get work from the major comic book companies, but never quite landed it. And that's where I started my graphic design career. And so sort of many years later, when the big black and white boom in comics started in the 90s, I decided to try and get back in and produced a little bit of work, but couldn't find a home for it at first because that's when that big black and white crash came through in the early 90s. And that was around the time that Marvel had filed for bankruptcy, things like that. A lot of black and white publishers, independents were closing down. But I did manage to hook up around 1995 with a guy named Gary Carlson, who was producing and editing a book called Big Bang Comics with Chris Ecker. And they were doing that for Image Comics, and they liked my work. And so that was my first stuff that was actually published, was in the mid 90s. And I don't know if you're familiar with Big Bang Comics, but they were an Image title, and they did a lot of retro stuff. They were always sort of aping comics from earlier eras, whether it was Golden Age or Silver Age. And I sort of became their Kurt Swan for the Ultraman stories there. And plus they published the character that I had created on my own that I had been shopping around to independents, a guy named the Sphinx. And so I did a lot of work for them at first, and then decided to see about doing children's books, and managed to sell a couple of like kids' picture books sort of based on comics about a character called Atomic Ace. And I had some success with those things. And ever since then, I had worked in children's publishing and a little bit in sort of novelty books too. I hooked up with a guy named Mike Spradlin, and we produced a series of books that were these basically sort of song parody books of popular genres of songs. The first one was Christmas carols, and the next one was love songs, and then there was one for nursery rhymes, but they were all rewritten to be about zombies, to sort of capitalize on the big zombie craze. So the first one was beginning to look a lot like zombies. I did all the spot illustrations for that, and they were pretty illustration heavy too. They each had, you know, an illustration on one page and some rhyming, some parody song lyrics on the other. And so I did a bunch of things like that. And I also did some graphic novels for publishers, for children's publishers. And I had done a couple of years ago, the biggest project that I did was a graphic novel for kids called Dragon Girl.
Yep.
And I think that's probably what caught the attention of King Features, or at least Terry Beatty, who recommended me to King Features. And that's how I ended up landing the Phantom. It wasn't even something that I had asked for. It was just texted one day by Terry Beatty and said, would you be interested in taking over Phantom for me? And I said, absolutely. And so I think he forwarded like 6 different names to the King Features people, and they called me one day and said, we pick you. And so I said, great.
So you said absolutely there. Have you always been a fan of the Phantom, have you? Or it's been part of your comic reading?
I haven't followed it in a long time, but I grew up with it in my hometown newspaper in Freeport, Illinois. And that was during the Cy Berry era. And, of course, everybody admires that particular era of the strip because Cy Berry was such a terrific artist. And so I read it every day back then and was very familiar with it. And ever since I had moved away from my hometown, it was a lot harder to come by, especially in those pre-web days. And so I hadn't seen it in a long time. Since this job opportunity came up, and I joined King Features' Comics Kingdom website, and I've been sort of catching up on the last 20 years of Phantom to see what's been going on. So I started reading with the last strips that Lee Falk had done, and up through all the different eras. So I'm sort of finishing up the last couple of years of Paul Ryan's run now, and so I'm pretty much up to date with what's been going on in Phantom for the last almost 20 years or so.
Have you found that important to do in terms of the plot, Jeff, and the characters, or more the artistic styles?
Both, actually. I wanted to see what had happened post Cy Berry, see what he was looking like, and also to familiarize myself with, you know, if there were any new characters or any new turns in the narrative, and just to steep myself in the lore of the character that I might have missed since childhood. So I thought that was really important because I really wanted to carry on whatever tradition existed with the character, and I thought it was important for me to familiarize myself with that.
No, that's good to hear. So in reading all the backlog, do you have a couple of favorite Phantom stories or favorite Phantom moments that stick in your memory, either as a child or since you've been rereading them?
Gosh, in terms of storylines, I don't remember the storylines from my childhood very well, to be honest. I do think, do you guys know, I don't know how, do you know when he got married, what year that happened?
77.
Yeah.
Yep.
See, I was reading prior to that, so I certainly remember that he wasn't married at the time. I was kind of thinking that maybe I remembered when they did get married at one point, and I would have still been in town in '77, I think. But I was more attracted by just the whole mythology around the character than any one particular storyline.
Yeah.
And, attracted by the artistry of Cy Berry drawing it too. But the whole thing of, him living in the jungle and I think at the time living in a tree house and the Skull Cave and all that kind of stuff, just having daily exposure to that attracted me the same way the rest of well-drawn comics did.
So I'm assuming it was more the artwork that attracted you as would it be fair to say that's more the artwork that attracted you as a child?
Yeah, and I think that that's true of almost all my interest in comics. The thing that always pulls me in is the artist and the skill that they're carrying it off with. I was always more attracted to, following books. Rather than following characters, I followed artists more. If an artist that I like moved from one book to another, I would start reading that book if I hadn't been reading it previously.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I would abandon it necessarily, but I just was interested in certain people's artwork and would follow them from assignment to assignment wherever they ended up. And of course, for the Phantom, I was always around because Cy Berry worked on the thing for 30 years or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. So is your excitement about, your enthusiasm about joining the strip, did that have much to do with was it partly the iconic nature of the character, the first ever costumed comic strip hero, the 81 years of history, the standing in the comic book world? Did that have was that part of the reason you were enthusiastic about working on the strip?
Yeah, that was the biggest part of it. I mean, the Phantom is a pretty important character in comics history.
Sure.
And he's really sort of the foundation of superhero comics. And the other thing that I found really interesting about him was checking back and looking at how he exists today. He still seemed like the same character that I knew when I was a kid. A lot of the characters that I really loved as a kid are so different now in their tone and in their depiction that, I remember thinking at the time that if I had a list of like the top 5 characters that I would love to be drawing, the Phantom probably would have been one of them. Which is surprising because it never occurred to me that I would have the opportunity to do it. Like I said, it sort of came out of the blue one day when I was texted by Terry Beatty and asked.
Well, you know what they say, Jeff. You don't find the Phantom finds you.
That's right. Old jungle saying, yeah. And that's really how it worked. It was really a bolt from the blue, and just about floored me when I was approached about it. When I checked into him, he still seemed like the same guy, and I can't say that about some of the other characters that I loved, like Superman and Batman. Very different from when I was a kid.
So this is jumping around a little bit, but
sure.
Would you be, and you may well be the artist on board when it happens, according to what we can sort of judge, but would you be someone who'd be interested in moving to the 22nd Phantom? And I mean, that would be a big change, or do you think that the 21st needs to stick around for a bit longer yet?
I've thought about that a little bit as I've been reading through the strips, and it seems like they're sort of setting up the Phantom's son for that possibility. I don't have a strong opinion about which of those directions I'd like to see it go, to be honest. I'm sort of intrigued by both. I'm so new to it now that I'm a little hesitant to try and change major parts of it. I'm not one of these guys who wants to jump in and try and really change it all around to turn it into something that's more me. And frankly, I don't have that opportunity anyway because I'm just drawing. I'm not scripting. So it's really something that's going to be up to the writer. But both possibilities intrigue me. But what I am concerned, or what I am interested in doing, is making sure that regardless of which of those two things happen, it still feels like the Phantom. It still feels like the strip that everybody loves. I don't know. Do you guys have an opinion about that? About whether someone else is going to take over for the role or not?
Oh, that's a wormhole, Jeff. We've spent entire podcasts discussing exactly that.
Yeah.
And, there's different moves going on in Scandinavia. I know that there's a storyline there where it's a future possibility.
Mm-hmm.
That's
a big topic for a Phantom fan.
Yeah, I think Dan, I think we're all of the opinion that, well, on this podcast anyway, that I think we can kind of live with either way. I think Lee Falk, in a few interviews that we've seen and all that, he kind of hinted that it was a real possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think he got around to it, or he moved on from that idea. But I think you're right that it has to be done right either way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But my issue is that there's starting to be continuity problems in terms of the 21st Phantom fought in World War II, but then we see other stories where the 20th Phantom fought in World War II, and either way, that's 70 years ago, and that starts to make some of the original strips problematic and where it all fits in history. So, yeah, personally, I probably feel like we do need to head in that direction, but the important thing is, as you say, that it's done properly.
Yeah. Well, so many of these old comic strip characters and comic book characters have that same sort of continuity problem, and it's just unavoidable when they're around that long. My feeling about it is just go with the flow. I mean, there's just no way to untangle those webs anymore, and I don't get too bogged down in worrying about continuity anymore, so long as what's going on currently makes a kind of sense and is true at least to the spirit of the character, rather
for sure.
Instead of just the continuity of the character.
I think you can almost, you used a very good analogy with the webs. I think you can almost get too entangled trying to fix the continuity issues.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that people worry about that a little bit too much, and they can damage the character that way. A good example is Superman, the Superman reboot that occurred in the 80s. If you guys are familiar with that.
Only vaguely.
At some point, the comic book company DC Comics decided that their continuity was just such a mess from so many years of history that they sort of rebooted the whole line with a series called Crisis on Infinite Earths. And part of that was to sort of revamp Superman and drag away all of the things that people were so familiar with from the character from the 60s, and just sort of abandon it all and start fresh again. And, I still maintain that although a lot of that post-reboot stuff was pretty good comics, I still think that the problem wasn't so much with all of the history of the character and how to deal with it. It was just more of the writers and whether they were doing a good job with it or not. That's sort of the view that writer Alan Moore takes about it too. He was like, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. It's really a matter of how you use this old continuity, and not so much the continuity itself that's the problem.
Yeah. You raise a good point. So, up until just recently, and I suppose you're still doing as well, you've been doing Tony D. Paul's strips. What was your working relationship like with him?
It was really great, actually. He's been very friendly and very nice and very helpful. He's really good about referring me back to old strips for reference that I might need on any given point in the story. They were very patient with me. Like I said, when I first signed on, I hadn't read Phantom in quite a while. Yeah. And so he was quick to refer me to visual reference to familiarize me with characters that I either didn't remember very well, like Guren, or ones that I hadn't been familiar with at all, like Babudan. of course, I had to see what Jungle Patrol headquarters looked like because I hadn't seen it for a while, and things like that. And he was always really great about saying, oh yeah, you got to go back to 2009 June 12th or something like that to see what this looks like.
So did you meet him personally, or was this all
No,
over the phone?
I haven't met him personally. It was all through email, actually. I've never talked to him directly. We've written back and forth. It's all through email.
Yeah.
And I started, the first few weeks that I did, I would email pencils and finished strips to Terry, just sort of check my work, make sure that I was depicting characters correctly. And then after that, I didn't want to stay on Terry's radar too much because the reason he left was to sort of free up his time a little bit. And I didn't want to be too demanding about that as we went forward. But Tony quickly took over that role. And so I started emailing rough pencils and then finished strips to him before I sent them off to King Features so that he could catch any trouble that cropped up in the way I was showing anything.
Oh, wow, that's, yeah. Terry's, Terry and, I met Terry when he came to Australia a couple of years ago, and we've been in touch with Tony D. Paul a few times throughout the years and all that, and they both seem like very genuine people. So it's good to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from memory it was your third strip that you actually got to draw the Phantom, and was that correct?
Yeah.
Or was it the fourth one?
I think it might have been farther along than that. It was fourth or fifth, I think. I don't remember for sure.
Yeah.
But all the conversations was like, are we going to see Jeff's Phantom this week? And then we'll wait for it, and it's like, no, not this week. What about next week? No, not next week. So, it was a bit weird, like in the sense that it took, like we got the announcement, and then it took probably a month after the actual announcement to see your actual first Phantom.
Right. I was sort of chomping at the bit to get to him too, but it's probably good that I didn't get to right away. It gave me a chance to sort of warm up on some of the minor characters before I got to the big guy.
True.
I'm sort of getting my sea legs in terms of depicting him, I think. I don't know if you guys see the title panel that I do.
Yes.
That's attached. But if you look really closely, you'll see like little changes almost every week that I'm
in the title panel.
Yeah, in the title panel, in the character's depiction in the title panel. As I sort of get to know him a little bit better, little things move, his figure changes just a little bit. I don't redraw it all together, but every couple of weeks, there's some little minor alteration in it as I figure out what I'm getting wrong and what I'm getting right. So that's good. That's a good Where's Waldo exercise for the fans out there if they want to look each week and see what little change I've made or haven't made. Like just this week again, even though I'm a bunch of weeks in now, I made another little change to him about something that I thought was wrong.
So what's probably been the hardest part about the actual Phantom that you've had to kind of get your head around, or like with the drawing and stuff like that?
Well, let's see. I was really concerned about getting his face right. He has very distinctive features, and I wanted people to see that I wasn't trying to change those wholesale. Yeah. So often I don't think anybody's publishing his adventures here in America right now in comic book form. I could be wrong about that. But I seem to see a lot of depictions of him from overseas that really radically depart from that sort of Cyberry, square-jawed depiction of him, that Roman nose. And I'm not crazy about those. I want him to look like people are familiar with him looking. I'm one of those guys that thinks Superman should look the way Kurt Swan drew him for so long, too. And so I don't want to jar people by departing from that much. And so I'm still figuring that out. I still haven't had a chance to draw him a lot, to be honest. But the first few weeks where he actually appears in the strip, I'm still not entirely happy with the way he's coming off, but I'm getting there. I'm hoping I get a long stretch in this next storyline with him in it, and then really start to get to know him a little bit better, and can really figure out how to depict him in the way that I think he should look, and that you guys think he should look too. More importantly.
Yeah, well, certainly that's appreciated, because one of the great things about the Phantom character, and you seem to be really aware of it, is the long, again, that long history of people who have read him and
Right.
have that familiarity, whether it goes back to Barry or McCoy or Moore even, and that continuation through. So I think everyone expects that you'll, put your own spin on him and that sort of thing, and it will be a Weigel Phantom, but the awareness that it needs to be something familiar is very much appreciated.
Yeah, that's really important to me. That he stays the guy that everybody is so fond of right now.
Yeah, definitely.
So how far ahead are you on? You're talking about a new story. Are you into the next story yet? Like how long did you have to keep a lid on it and not say anything before your Phantoms came out? And how far ahead are you now?
I was told not to say anything until it was something that was going to be obvious, which is to say,
Right.
When Terry mentioned that he was leaving, which was the week before my first strip ran, that's when I said, "Oh, I can tell people." And I was really secretive about it too.
It was really sudden.
Yeah.
As fans, and we pay as much attention as anybody, nobody knew anything until Terry announced it.
Yeah, and the reason for that is that apparently newspapers will use a change of creative team as an excuse to drop the strip if they're looking for an excuse to do it. And so King Features wanted us to stay quiet about it for that reason. Because these newspaper editors don't have the same reverence for these things as the fans do.
That's been around, That's been around probably since when Wilson McCoy took over from Ray Moore. It was very hush hush, and Wilson McCoy had to copy Ray Moore's style, so that the change wasn't obvious.
Yeah.
And McCoy to Barry as well.
Yeah.
And that always seems to be the case, I mean, people are so used to these characters that they don't want that jarring change. It makes for some strange things going on. I mean, the best example I can think of is in the comic strip Blondie. A guy named Stan Drake took it over at one point, and Stan Drake is one of the great draftsmen in comics. He used to do a lot of what did he? I think he worked on. Gosh, I hope I'm not getting this wrong. Juliet Jones, maybe.
I think that's right. Cy Barry actually mentioned Stan Drake explicitly when we spoke to him as well. So clearly someone who is,
but he was really a good, realistic, dramatic strip artist. And he took over Blondie, which is like 180 degrees opposite of what we're used to seeing from him. And of course, he had to do it exactly like it had been drawn before, which must have been that's really fitting a square peg into a round hole. But it's important to have that continuity for the daily readers, I guess, because they don't follow these things. They just want to know that Blondie and Dagwood are going to look like Blondie and Dagwood every day. It's sort of an important part of their day over morning coffee, I suppose. And they don't know one comic strip creator from another. They just freak out when all of a sudden there's a big change in that thing that they're so used to during the course of their day. So
in that sense, was it a bit awkward coming in halfway through Terry's story?
No, not at all, because the concern about maintaining continuity of the character, of the look of the character, was something that I was actually more concerned about than the editors. I never had the editors say to me, and you got to make it look just like Terry's, because if you don't, there'll be big trouble. I mean, nobody said anything to me along those lines. And, but I knew that it would be a concern. I didn't try and ape Terry's style, really. But I think, well, my concerns taking over the character were probably the same concerns as Terry had when he did it, I think 5 or so years earlier. And that everybody that works on the Phantom does, is that they just want to maintain the tradition. They want to make sure that this doesn't look like a completely different guy when they take over, and alienate readers who are used to who he is, who the character is. So I wasn't trying to ape Terry's inking style or anything like that. I just wanted to make sure that the Phantom stayed the Phantom.
Yeah. So with what we're seeing at the moment, is that your style, or is still finding your style when it comes to the Phantom?
Well, no, I think it is my style of inking and rendering. And I'm still, like I said, trying to get a handle on exactly how to show the Phantom, how, what his facial features are and things like that. Because like I said, I haven't had a chance to draw him a lot through this storyline, at least my idea of drawing him a lot. There were a lot of strips in this particular storyline where he doesn't appear at all. And so, like I said, the more I draw him, the better handle I get. Usually, it was weeks into him being in the strip when I finally started to feel like I was getting there. And
that's to be expected.
Yeah.
With any new job, you take a little while to find your feet
right.
in it, whether you're a
my hope
artist or a ditch digger,
my hope was that the fans would have patience with me as I sort of felt my way through that part of it. But I haven't seen a lot of complaints on the website just yet, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, that means you're doing something right.
So, Jeff, you've mentioned a couple of times King Feature Syndicate, and when Terry, passed your name on and they gave you the call, and you've said that the editors haven't really been too insistent on a particular style or anything. What is that working relationship with the people at KFS like?
It's been very good. They've actually been very good about not nitpicking and just letting me do what I felt like I needed to do. They've been very hands-off in those terms. It's very helpful that Tony's been on the strip for so long, and so he's sort of the cop that tells me whether I'm getting things right or not. And also, he's been good too. I mean, he's the only time that he flagged, well, there were a couple of things that he flagged where I had made little mistakes in continuity or done something that was going to contradict something that I had to show later on. A good example is there's a scene that I think ran just last week, if I remember right, with a policewoman who originally, when I did the strip, I had shown her as a Jungle Patrol member. And he said, no, that's not right. She's got to be just like a regular policewoman. She's not part of the Jungle Patrol. And I had to go back and change her uniform a little bit, recolor her uniform. Originally, she had a pith helmet on, and I had to change that to like a policeman's baseball cap so that it was apparent that she wasn't Jungle Patrol.
Right.
That was the biggest change that Tony had requested. And after that, it's really nothing. After that, that's when I realized I need to be sending this guy these strips to make sure that he's keeping an eye out for this. And so that's why I send him rough pencils each week to say, anything that you need to point out to me that I'm screwing up. And so far, it's been pretty good. There was one strip. The other place where he called me on something was a mistake I had made where I had depicted Guren where it should have been Babadan.
Oh, yep, okay. So is that becoming problematic now with because Tony quite famously in the fandom world anyway about a month ago announced that he'd quit the strip and was no longer involved. Has that made it difficult for you?
No, not yet anyway. I have 1 week left of Tony's script, and then after that, I have nothing. And I'm hoping they're working that out so that I don't fall behind schedule. Earlier you had asked about how far ahead I was. I think I did the last strip for September this week. So I'm a few months ahead. So we've got a little bit of a cushion there. And hopefully, while they sort things out with this writer issue, I won't fall too far behind.
So you can't provide us with any clues about who the new writer might be or what's going on there?
Yeah, literally I can't, because I don't know exactly what's going to happen yet.
Yeah. So do you find
it a bit scary?
Yeah. Do you find it awkward, like being in the job for such a short period of time, and it's happened where you've run out of scripts?
No, I'm not too worried about it as long as it doesn't last too long.
Yeah.
If it were something that went on for like a month or so, I would start to become a little bit more worried. But doing this weekly strip doesn't take a ton of my time. It's more like a part-time job. It's not like I spend all day every day for 5 weeks or 5 days a week doing the Phantom. It's something that takes me a day to a day and a half to do, and the rest of the time I'm working on a graphic novel that I'm signed to do for an American publisher, which is a much bigger job for me. But in other words, it's not hard for me to catch up on the Phantom if I fall behind, because like the first week when I first got the assignment, I said I want to show these guys that I'm really willing to work hard and stay on schedule, and I did 4 strips in 1 week. So I can do that if I have to catch up. It's just that I would rather not. I'd rather, take it at a more stately pace so that I can pay attention to what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, certainly we all hope that writer issue is solved sooner rather than later, and it sounds like it's starting to become crunch time.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to finding out who's going to be taking over as much as anybody, if not.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, I'm assuming everything's digitally. You do everything digitally these days?
Yes, I have been doing the Phantom all digitally. In my work in general, I'll switch back and forth. But I found that, especially on the Phantom, as I sort of get my sea legs on it, the thing about doing it digitally right now is that, for one thing, I can do it anywhere. So I've worked on the Phantom in doctors' offices and, waiting for things, or just sitting in my living room. I'm not tied to a drawing board somewhere.
Yeah.
Because I work on an iPad Pro. And the other big advantage is that it's so easy to make changes. No whiteout is involved. And
that must be how you're redoing the title page and that pith helmet and that sort of thing.
That's right. Yeah, those things are much easier to change digitally than they are on paper. And that's been a big help too. The only downside, and of course I can zoom in on it as large as I want to. You have to be careful not to get lost in the weeds of detail and those sorts of things. But it's actually a lot easier in a lot of different ways. Although at some point I may go back to paper just because I don't want to lose that skill. And I think my inking maybe sometimes is a little more controlled with a brush and ink on paper too. But I'm still sort of comparing how those two different ways of working change my work. The iPad Pro is a relatively new thing. It's only been out for, a year or something like that is all the time that I've had it. And so I'm still sort of looking at how it changes my workflow and what parts of it help and what parts of it hinder.
Yeah.
But I do, like the graphic novel I'm working on, I'm probably still going to do on paper. And I'll switch back and forth, as a lot of artists do. I don't have a big Cintiq monitor of the kind that so many artists are using these days. I thought about making that change, but it's such an expensive piece of equipment. And when the iPad Pro came out, it seemed like it did everything I needed to do, and it was a lot more portable, a lot more affordable. And so I've been sticking with that. I don't know that I'll make the switch to Cintiq unless I see a really good reason to do so.
So for the un-artist talented peoples like myself and Dan, could you go through the process?
We have no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah. Could you go through the process of like getting the strip? Do you then just go straight onto the iPad and do your rough pencils, and then do you do the pencils over the top of that, or is it on a separate page? Or could you just go through a bit of the process for us?
Sure. Yeah, the way I work for not only the Phantom but anything I do is, in the case of the Phantom anyway, I get a script from Tony, and it's all done at once. It's not like he sends it to me piece by piece each week. I'm told by Terry that the way he works is to do the whole thing all at once. And so here's your 40-page script for the next 26 weeks all at once, which is a great asset to have, to know what's coming, because you can read the story from start to finish.
Yeah.
And you can also then work at your own pace. You're not waiting for the writer to deliver, the script for the next week at any given point. So that's a great thing about Tony. And so I've got the script in hand, and I see he even breaks it down so I know how many panels I'm going to be dealing with in any given week too. Although he does give me the latitude to change that if I wanted. I don't think I have, but Tony's flexible enough that if I see something that, that he's designated as, one large panel, if I think that would work better in, two separate panels, I don't think he'd have a problem with that. But anyway, I've got the script in hand. The first thing I'll do is a thumbnail sketch, which is usually about, 3 inches wide, 2 inches tall, something like that, maybe a little bit larger. And just sort of work out what camera angles I'm going to use for each panel, just figure out what the action is going to be, how I'm going to tell the story visually in a very quick little sketch that's very chicken scratchy and that barely translates into anything anyone would recognize except me. I'm just figuring out the staging, the blocking, so to speak, for the action. And at that point, that's when, if I'm doing it on paper, what I'll do is I'll go to full size and I'll actually work on tissue paper at first and start sketching everything in roughly. And I'll do rough pencils on a tissue paper and then scan it into the computer. And I'll take that and then I will bring it into the computer program that I use and add the lettering from the script and make sure that I've left enough room for all the word balloons. And sometimes I'll find that I haven't. And then I can, in the computer in Photoshop, I'll shrink down a sketched figure a little bit or move things around a little. And also try and make drawing corrections to it. One of the things that, because I've been working in children's books and in a slightly more cartoony style for a lot of the things that I've been doing recently, my habit in the early Phantom strips was making heads too big. I had to sort of recalibrate my proportions for Phantom World, so to speak. And Terry, that was one of the great things that Terry did early on, as he was sort of monitoring my early sketches, saying, your heads are kind of big in these things. And I just had to get my consciousness of that a little more clearly. And so it's easy in Photoshop to just sort of encircle a head and shrink it down a little bit or change the position of it. So little drawing changes like that early on, along with the lettering. And once I've got everything positioned correctly and all the lettering in place, then I will print out that strip as a blue line on my large format printer here. and just ink over the top of that. And that way, all the artwork's there, and I don't have to erase pencil lines later on. Once the inking over the top of that blue line is done, then I can just scan that in and clean it up a little bit, and then start adding color in Photoshop. When I made the transition to using the iPad, I would do both of those stages, both the sketch stage and the inking stage, right on the screen, one over the top of the other. And again, it was very easy to make those sorts of changes, like shrinking heads or moving figures around a little bit on the iPad. It just eliminates the step of having to scan things in. So is that enough of a description? Is there anything I'm forgetting?
Yeah. That's fascinating. It's really, as someone who has got just the barest knowledge of how to use Photoshop, it's really interesting to hear you talk us through that process. Thank you. Well, I guess as a collector, one of the things that a lot of collectors love to chase is original artwork and that sort of thing. So it doesn't sound like there is any Jeff Weigel original Sunday art pages and that sort of thing that we could collect and frame and hang on a wall or put in a display book or anything like that. That would seem, there's so many upsides that you've just said, but that would seem like a downside to the method?
Yes, it is. That's why if I do go back to paper at some point, that would be the reason I would do it, is so that I'd have that sort of aftermarket option for the artwork itself. Because that's a big chunk of money to leave on the table if there's a demand for my original strips. But right now I decided it was a bigger priority for me, as limited as my time is, to have the convenience of doing it on the iPad, and to have the convenience of being able to make these minor changes and to try different things. That's the other thing about working on the iPad too, is I can I can add a layer to what I'm doing and try some sort of lighting scheme on the character. And if it doesn't work, I just throw the layer out and start over again with a different notion of doing it, rather than having to get out the whiteout, or God forbid having to start the panel all over again from scratch.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm looking to get more used to doing the strip before I try and make that jump back to paper, if I ever do that. The other nice thing about doing it doing it digitally is that the iPad is so portable that I work on the Phantom in the evenings, sitting in my living room with my wife close by, so that I'm not. And that way I'm not downstairs drawing on paper, sequestered away in my little studio, away from her.
Yes. And we have heard a number of artists' widows sort of take place in so it sounds like a good way to avoid that problem.
Yeah. It's important to me to avoid that. I need some sort of balance. I know that there are a lot of artists who, just seem to work constantly. I see Mike Manley's posts on Facebook.
Yeah.
And he's like doing all-nighters, and he seems he's working every Saturday night and things like that. And I think that was part of the problem with Terry too, is he seemed to be working so much. He said he was working 7 days a week. Of course, those guys are doing other strips at the same time too.
Yes.
But I think that I can't do that. I can't work 80 hours a week. Not that the Phantom would take up that much time, but this graphic novel that I'm working on certainly could if I let it. So between the graphic novel and Phantom, I could work those sorts of hours, but I think the work would suffer and I would suffer and I'd be unhappy about it instead of, I'm loving this. I'm loving drawing these things. But if I do it too much, it's going to take that pleasure away pretty quickly and start to drive me crazy. And, that's why I do it, is because I love doing it. I don't want to ruin it. And so if I start trying to, right now I'm probably doing 50 hours a week between all the things that I'm doing. And that's pretty much my limit for not wanting to kill myself.
Yeah.
Well, you've got to have a work-life balance, don't you?
Yeah, I certainly do anyway. I mean, there's so many tales of these guys like Jack Kirby who just seem to work constantly. And I don't know, they didn't seem to bother them. It seemed to work out fine for them. but that's just not the way I'm built. I can't put in those sorts of hours and be happy at the end of the day. So
Yeah. So has there been a panel or a Sunday or a moment that you've drawn so far that you're like really happy with? That's been like one of your, been a real joy in drawing and.
They all are really. There's usually individual panels more than actual whole Sundays. The opportunity to draw interesting lighting on a villain's face, or my first opportunity to draw the Phantom too. I wasn't entirely satisfied with the way I was showing him until a few weeks in. There was one strip where I sort of felt like he was starting to fire on all cylinders, and it was this sort of scene that's coming up in a few weeks. You guys will see it, where he actually takes on one of the villains in the strip, and there's sort of a fight between the two of them. And that was the first one where I said, yeah, I think I'm really starting to get the hang of this guy. So that was a lot of fun. To draw action scenes is always more fun than, drawing a crowd scene or something like that too.
Yeah.
So do you have any hopes or goals or ambitions with the strip?
I don't have any hopes or goals in terms of storyline or directions for the character. My hopes and goals are basically to feel like I'm doing a great job with it. And that sort of varies from panel to panel right now. And I think that probably that'll stay the same throughout my whole experience with the Phantom, as it is with anything that I work on. I mean, every artist has the same foible. They're never entirely satisfied with their work once they finish with it and have to send it off. But there are some panels where you're more satisfied than others, and there are some panels where you go, yeah, that's exactly what I was going for. That's the satisfying part of it. And I guess my goal going into the future is to make that batting average of satisfaction with the work a little higher than it is right now, as I'm still figuring out how to do this with the Phantom.
Yeah, so Terry had he always wanted to do Mandrake with the Phantom. He always wanted to do another team up. So do you have like a character you want to draw, or a storyline, or, like the Mandrake or something like that you would like to do with the Phantom one day?
I don't really. Things that I'm looking forward to is I'm looking forward to the chance to do Diana at some point, because she hasn't appeared in the strip yet. One of my goals, which I've already sort of met, was in the depiction of Devil. Even back in the Cy Berry days, Devil was this sort of German Shepherdy looking thing. And I really wanted him to be a wolf. So I've sort of been concentrating on, making sure that he's this big, impressive looking wolf rather than looking like a household pet.
Yeah.
And that's not to criticize anybody. I mean, that's the way it's been for a while. But I really wanted to take a crack at making him an intimidating presence in the strip.
Yeah.
So, depicting Diana, and I haven't done the Skull Cave yet, except in one commission that I did for somebody. That was an interesting thing as I signed on, is getting requests from all around the world for commissions for Phantom artwork, too.
Is that a regular thing that you've been getting?
Well, relatively regular, yeah. Every couple of weeks, somebody will approach me about it, and it's like, it can be from anywhere. I've done one for somebody in Germany, and somewhere in Scandinavia, and I've had inquiries from India and from as nearby as like Chicago here in the United States too. So
And you're more than happy to take those on board, I assume?
yeah, I sure am. I haven't like advertised it yet, like putting up an admission that I'd taken those sorts of commissions in on my website or anything like that, because I was still trying to figure out my schedule and make sure that I had enough time to do everything I needed to do. But yeah, it's something that I'm certainly open to as people approach me about it. And at some point, I'll actually come right out and say, hey guys, I'm doing commissions. And hopefully sometime in the future, I'll even say, hey, I'm doing these things, these strips on paper again. And if anybody's interested in the original strip art, that's available for sale too.
Well,
I know for a fact that there would be people interested, yeah.
Really?
I reckon
Okay,
you'll
well,
be
I'm going to
getting,
keep that in mind. I'll definitely go back to that. It may not be for a while because I may need to get this graphic novel off my plate before I have the time
Sure.
to do that. But yeah, it's something that I definitely have in mind for the future because I know there's a market for it, and I hate to leave that money on the table.
Yeah. I reckon you'll get a few more commission requests after some people will listen to the podcast as well.
No, that's great. That's good. And if anybody needs my contact information to try and talk to me about that, it's very easy to email me. If they just go to my website, jeffweigel.com, all my contact information is there. So it's very easy to reach me if they just Google my name.
Cool.
Definitely.
And we'll certainly include links to that on the page where we publish the podcast and sort of thing, so people can go back and check that out.
And I'll just add that if they go to my website at this point, they still won't see any mention of Phantom just because I've been so busy I haven't had a chance to update my website with that information. But
yeah,
they're in the right place if they go to jeffweigel.com. Very
good. So this is a question that sort of stems out of the uncertainty that we're looking at with Tony at the moment. Jeff, do you have yourself any? Is it a contract with Kingfisher Syndicate, or is it have you got guarantees that you're on for a long term or a short term, or
Yes, I have a contract for at least a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
oh, that's good.
I did a bunch. The first bunch that I did was just on a piece-by-piece basis until they made sure that I was somebody who was responsible and responsive. But they very quickly said, you're the guy, and gave me a contract. And they said, it'll just be for 1 year now, and we'll renew later on. But I don't get the sense that I'm on, double secret probation or anything like that with kids. And hopefully, I told my wife as soon as I landed this, my hope is to go 20 years. I really see Phantom as a long-term thing for me. I would like to do it for the rest of my work life if I can. Because it's, and as long as I'm welcome with the fans and with King Features, I can't say 20 years out, or I can't even say I'll live another 20 years. But my goal...
You're not the artist who cannot die?
Well, here's my thinking is that I spent so many years in graphic design doing work that I wasn't always happy to be doing. And so my goal is to do the Phantom for as long as I held my last graphic design job, just to sort of offset that experience. I would like to say something I'd love for as long as I had to do something that I didn't love that much. And I held my last job for 21 years, so I'm hoping to hold Phantom for that long.
Well, certainly online, people are very happy to criticise and peg you down. And as you said, and we certainly haven't seen a lot of negative comments, so the fact that people aren't putting negative comments means they're happy enough. So I'd say the fans would be pleased to see you take it for as long as you can as well.
Well, I'm hoping to fulfill their expectations. And frankly, I read their comments too. And I know that they can be pretty harsh sometimes, although it seems like they've been pretty kind to me so far. I haven't seen anybody complain too much about anything. But, I found my graphic novel that I mentioned earlier, Dragon Girl, is actually, that was published by Andrews McMeel, and they are an arm of the other big comics syndicate in the United States. And so they run oh gosh, what do they call it? I'm having a aneurysm here. Let me go on the web here and just remind myself what this is. Let's see. Let's see, comic strips. Oh, Go Comics, right? Go Comics. I couldn't think of it for some reason. Is like Comics Kingdom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, the Dragon Girl comic, the graphic novel, is syndicated page by page on Go Comics. So if anybody's interested, they can go there and read it. And there were comments there every day as it ran, and I read all of those. And generally, if somebody had a problem with what was going on, they were kind of right. It was like, yeah, that's kind of a weakness in what I did this particular day, and I take that stuff to heart. So if people want to go to comment on the Phantom each week and tell me what I'm doing wrong, I will see their comment and probably take it to heart for the next time out.
You might want to be careful what you wish for there, Tim.
I might be, but I also want to, and if somebody's just out there being a troll for no particular reason, that rolls off me too. I don't get too worried about that. But the comments that I found in Dragon Girl, where they found some fault with what I was doing, generally, like I said, I kind of agreed with and tried to make sure that mistake didn't happen again. And I'll take that same approach to the Phantom, unless what they say is full of crap, and then that I'll ignore.
Oh, good.
Oh, that's good. So, do you have any ambitions to maybe do a story for Fru or Egmont? Or
I'm sorry, for
just this. So Fru and Egmont are the Australian and Scandinavian creators who do Phantom stories. So is that something you wouldn't mind doing down the track, or you?
Yeah, I'd love to actually, because the format for doing comics in comic books is a lot freer. There's a lot more possibilities in how to tell the story than in that strict newspaper strip format. The Phantom is very carefully formatted, and I can't break from that. This grid of panels that they have. Sometimes they're double wide, sometimes they're single, but beyond that, I can't break up that page much of what happens to those, what the newspapers do with it, and also how I understand it's recollected into comic book form, and the strips have to be sort of divided up in a certain way to fit on a comic book page. So it's that very strict format also makes for very strict storytelling. And the comic book page is a lot more versatile in how I can tell the stories. So I'd love to do work like that for one of the other publishers of regular comic books. I'd love to do Phantom stories for them. Although chances are this graphic novel that I keep mentioning is something that I'll be working on for the next year probably. And so I don't think I'll have time in my schedule to do it for a while. But as soon as I'm finished with that, which should be, according to the schedule, June of next year, I'm hoping to get that sort of work. I'd love to do it.
Well, the people who have the power for both publishers do listen to the podcast. So
okay, great.
So any of you guys,
they contact me at some point. Yeah, that would be.
No, so is there, anything else you would like to make mention or comment on before we wrap this up?
Gosh, I guess the only thing I really want to impress upon people is that I love this character as much as they do, and I have a lot of reverence for the deep tradition of the Phantom strip, and I'm going to be working really hard to try and be worthy of the tradition that I'm carrying on. It's really important to me, just the way it is to the.
No, well,
That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, it is. I can sense I can sense that in talking to you as well. Just the love and the passion and.
And to be honest, I think we can already see that in the strip. And like you mentioned before about I hadn't seen the Jungle Patrol headquarters, and you had to go back and look at that. I couldn't pick that up when I was reading the comic books at all. The strip. It looks what I think the Jungle Patrol headquarters looks like, and so I think I'm looking forward to your Skull Cave. I'm looking forward to hopefully we get back to the treehouse. I'm looking forward to the rest of Phantom Country as you explore that and find it. Show us that again. So well done.
And anybody that wants to friend me on Facebook to see what I'm up to on any given week, they should feel free to do that. I've been accepting a lot of new requests from all around the world, and most weeks I'll usually post some sort of a little panel preview of what I'm working on that week, so people will see ahead of time what might be coming up with the Phantom.
No worries. Well, I'm one of those friends as well that keeps an eye on it now.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. And so you did get a reasonable boost in followers. We like to think that the Phantom is popular enough that people will listen to the podcast and check out our website at least. But you did get a bit of a boost in terms of people checking you out.
I got a big boost. Yeah. I don't know what the actual number of followers is right now. I mean, it's not up there with a lot of the other guys the artists who have bigger reputations than I do. But initially I got a lot, scores and scores of new friend requests, and I seem to be getting new ones, a few more a week. It's not like I'm looking to get a huge presence on Facebook, but it's nice to know that people are paying attention and are interested. Every artist would like to know that somebody's looking at their work.
Sure. So jeffweigel.com, and of course hitting you up on Facebook. Is there any other social media or anything else that you'd like to plug where people can see what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I'm signed up on Twitter and Instagram too, but honestly I don't pay too much attention to those right now. But I may in the future, if I can get enough ambition to start marketing myself a little more aggressively. They might see more work there. But I actually don't think you'll see anything on one that you don't see on the other. So if you do Instagram or Twitter, you might miss some things. But if you do Facebook, I don't think you'll miss anything. Anything that goes on Facebook, that's the first place that I'll start putting stuff. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I enjoy getting to know you a little bit more as a Phantom artist, and getting to know the process of how you're working and the love and the passion that you have for the character. So, on behalf of on myself, and I appreciate taking the time, and I'm glad that internal alarm clock woke you up.
Well, it's great to meet you guys. I'm glad you contacted me, and I'm glad I have a chance to talk about this new assignment that I'm so excited about too. So I hope people are happy with what they're seeing from me in the weeks to come.
And I think we'd probably like to, maybe give it a year or so, and or whatever, and touch base with you again, and see how you've settled into the character and that sort of thing. It's really, really good that I think in this day and age that creators, authors and artists and that sort of thing do have that connection with their public and their fans. So, yeah, as Jermaine said, we really appreciate you taking the time.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you what, let's make it a date. 4 a.m. next year, this same day.
So, aim it around Independence Day and we're good to go.
That's right. I'll put it in my calendar.
Good stuff.
Hey, before you guys go, there's one question that I want to ask about, and that's, since I signed on to this, I've been looking to sort of commemorate my joining the Phantom team with some sort of Phantom memorabilia, like a action figure or something like that, just for my collection of things.
Yep.
And I can't find any good stuff Except
Yeah.
in Australia, there seems to be some stuff like that. Is that
Yeah.
true? You guys have stuff available that's sort of
Yeah.
worthwhile over there?
So what were you looking for? Were you looking for like a statue or?
Ideally, like a nice action figure, of like the 6-inch variety or something like that. But I did come to I found a website where they had couple of nice statues, but the place that has them says that they only sell to retailers. They don't sell to individuals. So I guess I was out of luck there. So
Okay.
Well, that's an excellent segue, Jeff, because at the moment Chronicle Chamber is running a competition for people who are want to make suggestions for new collectibles, and the prize is a
Right.
statue.
I saw that. I think that your website is actually where that flagged that for me.
Yeah, okay, and Icon, they're the ones running the competition, and they do only sell to retailers, and I think I know the statue you're talking about, and it is a nice one.
Is that which one's that one, Dan? Is that the one with the 3 colours?
They had 2 that were sort of nice. One was him standing with guns drawn. The one I was most attracted to was him on Hero.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful statue.
Yeah.
We've both got one of those, and it is excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Australia is probably your best bet for those
Yeah.
things at the moment. There doesn't seem to be very much coming out in America at all.
There's some nice statues from Brazil, but postage from Brazil is quite expensive.
That statue that you're talking about is available on a website called popculture.com, and they do ship internationally.
Okay.
We can send you the link to that.
Oh, that would be great. I'd like to take a look at that.
Yeah.
Popculture.com. I'm writing that down.
It's spelt weird. CULTCHA, I think.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. If you would send me a link to that would be great.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
I'd appreciate it.
There's
Okay.
yeah. No, I appreciate your time on the podcast, Jeff. It was great.
Well, thanks for contacting me about it. I'm always happy to talk about this and to be in touch with Phantom fans, because I'm really trying to make sure that they're satisfied with what they see from me.
Oh, well, I'm satisfied, so you got at least
Okay,
one
well,
person
good.
that's satisfied.
Yeah, so far so good. That's for sure. We'll let you know if you start to stray.
Right. Well, my hope is that it's going to get better as time goes on rather than worse. So.
Yeah, I'm sure it will.
Okay.
All right. Well, I suppose you don't. What is it now? 6:30.
Over here?
What's the time? What's the time over there? Or is it 5:30?
It's 5:30 now.
So you've got your full day ahead of you still.
Well, actually, as soon as I get off the line with you, I'm going to finish coloring this week's Phantom very quickly. I started it yesterday. I'll probably finish it off this morning.
Awesome.
Awesome.
No worries. Well, thank you again, Jeff. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
And,
Thank you, guys.
And we'll talk to you again soon. Thank
Okay, so long.
bye. All right, guys. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dan, Jeff. And until next time, which will be the Comics and Reviews podcast, which will be interesting. I'm looking forward to that one. Happy Phantoming. Dan, happy Phantoming.
Happy Phantoming, everybody. And Steve, looking forward to having you on board next time.
It's been a while since he's been on, hasn't it?
He's still editing the podcasts and putting them up for us, so that's good. But otherwise,
He's doing all the hard work.
He is becoming the ghost who walks. Who just there's a whisper, there's a rumor of Steve in the background. We know he's about, but we need to hear from you, mate.
Steve. All right, guys. Happy Phantoming.
Good
Till
night.
next time.
500.
So you guys run the website. I can't think of the name of it, but it.
Yeah, Chronicle Chamber. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think,
And it's all devoted to Phantom stuff. Is that right? From what I've seen it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
Phantom stuff.
So Phantom seems to be a lot bigger over in Australia and actually other parts of the world than it is in the United States here.
Yes, it is.
We certainly have enough to keep ourselves busy with, and we only do fandom stuff on the website sort of thing. But he's pretty popular here.
That's great to know. That's good. The American comic strips don't have a lot of presence in American culture anymore, it seems like. It's good to know that there are still places out there that are paying a lot of attention to it.
All right, well, thank you, everyone who was listening to this. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as what we did, with a special guest starring of my daughter. I think she might have been a bit jealous with Angus and Tom. And
it's about time she gets on.
Yeah, so sorry about that, guys. But,
I don't know that she had enough of an appearance to get a Fruit Crew badge, though. So.
To be fair, I am in her bedroom as well, so she's... No, you get out, Dad.
All right, take 7.
All I can say is I'm glad this professional bit happens before or after talking to the guest.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, the talking to Jeff couldn't have gone more smoothly. Thank goodness. He probably thinks we know what we're doing.
It's gone horribly wrong. All right, so... Hello! Say Phantom. Did you enjoy going on the podcast? Have you been enjoying running around giving your mum grief? She's running around, she's not ready for sleep.
She's gone.
All right, mate.
All right. Good on you, mate. Talk to you soon.
Keep in touch.
All right.
Bye.
Cheers.
500 years ago, he washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck. And upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die. The Phantom! The ghost who walks. The Phantom! Enemies beware, the Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He finds you.